This is the secret war between Rwanda and Nigeria for Africa's tech crown. But the secret is that they are not fighting the same war. On one side you have Nigeria, Africa's most populous country, one of its largest economies. A place where companies like Paystack and Flutterwave turn messy payment problems into global fintech headlines. Stripe acquired Paystack in 2020. Flutterwave announced a $250 million Series D in 2022, at a valuation above $3 billion, according to company announcements and Reuters reporting. On the other side you have Rwanda, a much smaller, landlocked country that cannot match Nigeria's consumer scale. But Rwanda has something different. Zipline medical drone deliveries, CMU-Africa, Smart Africa in Kigali, Kigali Innovation City, and a long-running strategy to build a knowledge-based economy. So let's correct the title immediately. There is no verified evidence of a covert state-directed technology war between Rwanda and Nigeria. This is not espionage. It is not sabotage. It is not a hidden military conflict. The real war is strategic, economic, reputational, institutional. It is a contest over what the African tech crown even means. Does it mean capital, talent, startup exits, regulation, headquarters, conferences, pilots, digital public services, or the authority to define the rules other countries may copy? Lagos represents one model, a giant market-led ecosystem where founders attack real commercial friction from the bottom up. Kigali represents another, a state-led innovation platform where government coordination, policy access, and international partnerships create a controlled place to test new systems. And that is why the question is not which country has more hype. The question is whether Africa's digital future will be led by huge private markets like Nigeria or coordinated policy laboratories like Rwanda. The obvious answer seems to be Nigeria, because in technology, scale usually wins. But that is only the first layer. Nigeria's strongest claim is easy to see. It has the population. It has the cities. It has Lagos, one of Africa's most important commercial engines. It has a banking sector, mobile adoption, a large diaspora-linked founder network, and a constant flow of problems that are large enough to become companies. Nigeria's model is bottom-up technology growth. That simply means founders are not waiting for a perfect system. They build because the system is imperfect. Payments are fragmented. Financial inclusion is limited. Logistics are difficult. Services can be inefficient. Credit is hard to access. Commerce is huge, but it is often complicated. That sounds like weakness. But for startups, it can also be fuel. A broken payment experience is not just a complaint. It is a market. A merchant who struggles to accept digital payments is not just facing friction. That merchant is showing founders where the infrastructure is missing. This is where Paystack matters. Paystack was founded in Nigeria in 2015, and its story is powerful because the problem was plain. African merchants needed better payment infrastructure. Paystack built around that gap, and in 2020, Stripe acquired the company in a landmark African fintech transaction. That was not just a company exit. It was a signal to the world that African payment infrastructure could produce global value. Flutterwave pushed the same signal even louder. Founded in 2016 by Nigerian and African entrepreneurs, with major operations tied to Nigeria's payments market, Flutterwave became one of Africa's most visible fintech companies. In 2022, it announced a $250 million Series D round at a valuation above $3 billion. For investors, that is the kind of proof scale produces. Nigeria is not only about fintech. Andela, founded in 2014, helped globalize the idea that African software developers, including many from Nigeria, could serve international technology markets. Jumia's 2019 New York Stock Exchange listing also pulled attention toward African e-commerce, with Nigeria's consumer market central to that story. And this did not happen in a vacuum. Nigeria liberalized its telecommunications sector in 2001, accelerating mobile network growth. Later, the Nigerian National Broadband Plan 2020 to 2025 showed that the government recognized broadband as central to digital growth. Then the Nigeria Startup Act was signed into law in 2022, creating a legal and institutional framework for startups. So if Nigeria has the customers, the founders, the capital, and the commercial depth, why is Rwanda even in the conversation? Because Nigeria proves that African markets can produce companies global investors cannot ignore. But Rwanda is trying to prove something else. But Nigeria's power comes from the same conditions that make it hard to build there. And this is where Rwanda's opposite strategy starts to make sense. Rwanda entered this race from a very different place. After the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi, Rwanda faced the task of rebuilding institutions, services, and human capital. It did not have Nigeria's population. It did not have Nigeria's domestic market. It was landlocked. It had a limited natural resource base. And it needed ways to create higher-value services that could connect it to regional and global markets. So Rwanda's model became state-led innovation. That means the government plays a central role in planning, coordination, partnerships, public services, and control technology pilots. A pilot is a real-world test of a new system before it is scaled wider. Rwanda's strategy was not to outscale Nigeria. It was to become predictable, organized, and useful to partners looking for a place to test ideas. Vision 2020, launched in 2000, tied technology to Rwanda's ambition to build a knowledge-based economy. Vision 2050 continued that long-term planning approach. CMU-Africa, established in Rwanda in 2011, gave the country a high-profile engineering education anchor. Smart Africa, launched at the Transform Africa Summit in Kigali in 2013, helped position Rwanda as a convener of continental digital policy. The Smart Africa Alliance is headquartered in Kigali. Kigali Innovation City represents the same idea in physical form: cluster universities, technology firms, investors, and research institutions inside a planned innovation ecosystem. And the Rwanda Innovation Fund, supported by African Development Bank financing approved in 2018, shows how development finance became part of Rwanda's innovation building model. But the clearest reset is Zipline. In 2016, Zipline began using drones to deliver medical products in Rwanda. Suddenly, the story was not just policy documents or conference halls. It was a drone launch, a delivery route, a medical logistics problem being solved through technology, regulation, and a controlled operating environment. That is the humanizing detail inside Rwanda's tech brand. Not a unicorn valuation. A visible workflow where medical products move through the air because the state created enough coordination for the system to operate. So Rwanda's small size became a strategic tool. Coordination was easier. Policy access was clearer. The country could present itself as a trusted testbed. And that gave Rwanda influence beyond what its domestic market size would normally allow. At this point, the rivalry stops being about what each country inherited and becomes about what leaders, founders, regulators, and institutions chose to build. This is where the story stops being about what Nigeria and Rwanda were given, and starts being about what each one decided to build. Nigeria inherited scale. But scale alone does not build Paystack. Scale alone does not build Flutterwave. Scale alone does not train software developers or persuade global investors. Founders had to convert complexity into products. They looked at payments, commerce, logistics, credit, software outsourcing, and financial services, and built companies around the friction. Venture capital followed because the upside was visible. Nigeria's state also made choices, even if the model was less centralized than Rwanda's. Telecom liberalization in 2001 created a mobile foundation. The Broadband Plan in 2020 set infrastructure targets. The Startup Act in 2022 tried to formalize startup policy and improve coordination. Rwanda made a different set of choices. It connected national planning to technology. It built institutional partnerships. It hosted Smart Africa. It backed Kigali Innovation City. It attracted CMU-Africa. It used Zipline as a visible example of controlled technology experimentation. So neither story is destiny. Nigeria is not merely big. Its founders turned disorder into opportunity. Rwanda is not merely small. Its government turned coordination into influence. And that matters because countries do not compete only with what they have. They compete with what they organize. But here is the stress test. Which model breaks first under pressure? Nigeria's volatile scale, or Rwanda's curated predictability? That is where the admiration has to slow down. But once both countries begin choosing their models, the weaknesses of those models become impossible to ignore. Every crown has a crack. Nigeria has the scale investors want. But it often lacks the predictability investors prefer. Rwanda has the predictability investors prefer. But it lacks the domestic scale many startups need. That is the central contradiction. In Nigeria, the upside is enormous. But the cost of capturing it can be high. Startups have to operate around electricity reliability problems, broadband quality gaps, transport congestion, foreign exchange constraints, inflation, and regulatory uncertainty. For fintech companies, the Central Bank of Nigeria and other regulators matter deeply because payments, banking, cryptocurrency, digital lending, and foreign exchange are not side issues. They shape the business model. And foreign exchange is one of the hidden pressures. A startup may earn in Naira, but still pay for cloud services, software tools, equipment, or international obligations in dollars. That mismatch can become a real operational risk. But be careful. This does not mean Nigeria's ecosystem is weak. It means Nigeria is hard. And because it is hard, the companies that survive can become very serious. Rwanda's weakness is different. Its domestic market is much smaller. Its ecosystem depends heavily on partnerships with universities, donors, development banks, global firms, and public institutions. That can create credibility, but it also raises a difficult question. Can pilots become large companies? Can innovation hubs become broad employment? Can a controlled test environment produce startups that scale across Africa, not just projects that look impressive on a conference stage? There is also a common misconception here. The country with the most unicorns automatically has the best tech ecosystem. A unicorn is a private startup valued at $1 billion or more. It shows investor confidence, but it does not measure everything. It does not tell you whether digital services reach ordinary people. It does not prove job quality. It does not measure public infrastructure, long-term productivity, data rights, or trust in institutions. So a funding headline is important. But it is not the whole crown. Of course, that is not the whole story for Rwanda either. Policy clarity can attract pilots. It can lower friction. It can make a country easier to navigate. But commercial scale still matters, especially in fintech, e-commerce, and consumer platforms. So investors, founders, and governments face a real choice. Build where the market is huge but messy. Or pilot where the state is coordinated but the market is smaller. Neither option is complete on its own. So if neither model is complete on its own, the real question becomes, what is the crown actually made of? The real battlefield is not just apps. It is not just unicorns. It is not even just startup funding. The real battlefield is trust, rules, and digital infrastructure. Digital public infrastructure sounds technical, but the idea is simple. It is the rails, rules, and institutions that let digital services work at scale. Payment systems, digital identity, data governance, public services, business registration, broadband, interoperability. Interoperability means different systems can connect and work together, especially across borders. This is where Nigeria and Rwanda are not competing for the same object. Nigeria competes through companies and transaction volume. Its fintech payment infrastructure, founder density, developer networks, and large customer base give it commercial force. Rwanda competes through institutions and operating trust. Smart Africa in Kigali, digital public services, policy coordination, drone logistics experimentation, CMU-Africa, and Kigali's convening power give it influence over how technology is discussed, tested, and governed. One model says, build where the market is so large that the problems themselves create billion-dollar opportunities. The other says, Build enough coordination that partners trust you to test the future. And this is the banger. The African tech crown is not a single trophy sitting in Lagos or Kigali. It is a set of functions: scale, capital, talent, policy, infrastructure, trust, cross-border operability. Nigeria has the strongest commercial claim because it has population, fintech depth, founder networks, and venture-backed company formation. Rwanda has the strongest governance and experimentation claim because it has policy coherence, institutional access, innovation branding, and visible test cases like Zipline. But the deeper question is whether these strengths can connect. Because African technology does not stop at national borders. Startups want to move payments, data, services, talent, and products across markets. But regulators, telecom systems, data rules, currencies, and public institutions often move at different speeds. That is why the future may depend less on who wins the narrative, and more on whether African markets become interoperable enough for companies to build across borders. If a Nigerian fintech can scale more easily across the continent, Nigeria's market-led model becomes even more powerful. If Rwanda can help shape trusted rules, pilots, and digital governance that other countries can adapt, Rwanda's policy model becomes even more relevant. So the crown is segmented. Commercial scale can live in one place. Governance influence can live in another. Talent, capital, research, logistics, energy, and manufacturing can be distributed across many hubs. That means the future may not belong to the country that defeats the other, but to the countries that learn how to connect their strengths. Imagine an African digital economy where a startup is not trapped inside the borders of its first market. A founder could build for Nigeria's scale, test with Rwanda's policy clarity, raise capital through regional networks, hire talent across multiple countries, and serve customers through interoperable payment and identity systems. That is a different kind of crown. Not a crown worn by one capital city. A crown built into the architecture of the continent. Nigeria's next test is not whether it has enough ambition. It clearly does. The test is whether infrastructure, broadband, power, foreign exchange access, regulatory predictability, and public digital systems can improve fast enough to match the energy of its founders. Rwanda's next test is not whether it can create a powerful innovation brand. It already has. The test is whether pilots, hubs, and policy influence can become scalable private companies and broad employment. And beyond both countries, other African hubs will add their own strengths in manufacturing, research, logistics, energy, and capital markets. So the real prize is not Lagos beating Kigali. And it is not Kigali outsmarting Lagos. The real prize is an African digital economy where scale, policy, capital, talent, and trust can move across borders. So here is the question. If you had to judge the models, not the countries, what does Africa's tech future need most? Nigeria's scale? Rwanda's coordination? Or a hybrid powerful enough to make the whole continent build faster?